past, just gone. So we will make a start, if that's okay. So welcome everybody to Executive Board. We have apologies from Councillor Jens, substituting Councillor Davey.
Apologies from Councillor Pete Morrison, he's unwell.
Thank you. And we have.
She's the account.
I know Bernadette is in the building. And running slates that they are caught in traffic. They will be here shortly, will be Councillor Simpson and Hayford. So we'll make a start. Item number 3. Oh, sorry, I haven't done the evacuation procedure, have I? So the evacuation procedure. Well, we all know it, I think, don't we? Because we're all staff or members.
Take it as read. Take it as read. No,
okay, we'll take that as read. Thank you. Item number 2 is apologies, which we've done. Item number 3, disclosable pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. None. Okay. Item 4, public participation. Thank you. Item 5, minutes of the Executive Board held on the 12th of October 2022. Proposed by Councillor Simmons, seconded by Councillor Bell. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, so item number 6 is the calendar of meetings 2022-23 and 2023-24. So this is the annual report to agree the dates of our meetings in the 2023-24 and also to suggest some changes to some dates in the current financial year. So as the report sets out in paragraph 2.1, in order to give more time around the Christmas and New Year period, particularly for the preparation of budget information, it is suggested that Community and Environment and Resources Board meeting dates in January are moved back by 1 week, respectively. So they are going from the 16th to the 23rd, and from the 23rd to the 30th. However, before you take the 16th out of your diaries, what I'm suggesting is that we have a member briefing session on the LATCO. This would be similar to the briefing session we had for the multi-recycling facility. And given the number of documents that will need to be considered to set up the LATCO next year, a dedicated session will be arranged to go through those in some detail, including with input from our external leisure and legal advisors. So with that addition, I'll propose the recommendation. Has anybody got any comments, questions, queries? Do I have a seconder? Hello, everybody. Thank you. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, item number 7. Elections May 2023, voter ID, polling stations and scale of fees. So the Election Act 2022 introduces significant changes to our voting system, and this report sets out some of the major changes and how the council intends to manage those tasks. Linked to this, there are a number of new duties for election staff, particularly with regard to checking voters' ID, and increases in the fees for this work is proposed. The report also sets out some changes to polling stations in the borough, namely the reinstatement of Chancery Court in Hartshill following cross-party feedback, and given that this venue is once again available to the council for elections. There is also a change of venue in Osprey that needs to be added to the recommendation. Councillor Gosling.
Just to comment that obviously we're quite concerned about changes to the voter ID in the electoral system. And I think that it needs a very strong emphasis on education and making sure that any information that we are sending out from the council has reference to it, to make sure that people have got an early warning as possible and direction for assistance.
I totally agree. Councillor Gosling, yes. Councillor Chambers.
Yes, I mean, I feel a bit worried or concerned for our staff really that are going to be handling this, because I can imagine that people will come to these polling stations having forgotten that they need their ID. Elderly people then have got to walk back, and then they'll, you know, are we going to provide any kind of transport or support, or is there any flexibility if they don't appear with this ID, given that it's the first, you know, change that there's to be? And I totally agree that there needs to be quite a lot of well in advance publicity rolling every day almost on the council and through every outlet that we've got as partners to make sure that people are aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with your concerns. I think as a council, what we can do as a council is to do exactly as Councillor Gosling has described, and that's publicise the changes. You know, clearly because it's the national changes. I'm assuming, hopefully correctly, there will be a national campaign to identify and to inform the public and the electorate of these changes and what the requirements are. As far as transport, clearly the council, can't provide transport. I should imagine, though, that certain political parties may also do their own publicity on this, and do it like that, really. Councillor Bell.
Thanks. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for reinstating Chancery Court. Also, much needed. Thank you very much. No, on this business about identification, what's it called? The voter ID, National Voter Authority Certificate. Is there an application form for that? And if so, are we allowed to take that around with us when we're going around houses to give to people?
Can I invite, through you, Chair, Martin Harris? I don't know whether everybody knows Martin, but Martin's our elections manager, so I thought it'd be useful for him to come along and answer difficult questions like that. So, Martin, could you answer that difficult question?
Yes, welcome, Martin.
Welcome and get stuck into that.
Yes, there is a paper application for your voter authority certificate. It's not a voter ID card, it will be a piece of paper, like your paper driving licence, but with a photograph on it, so security features in it, so that certificate. You can apply online, there's a paper application form, and we will make the facility available for people to come here and apply with their documents and things like that. Now, there's nothing stopping political parties providing those application forms. The person, though, will have to provide the photograph, copies of their utility bills, other evidence of their identity, and then get it to us.
They've got to bring it here.
Yeah. So what I wouldn't suggest is you handle any completed applications, because then you've got sensitive information from voters that then you are handling, which you probably shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So they bring it here or they apply online. Is that
right?
And then it comes to us.
Yeah, and we're trying to make as many avenues available as possible for people to apply for this, because if they haven't got one of the original forms of ID, chances are they may struggle in other areas of life in terms of getting access to services and things like that. So we're doing what we can to make that available.
So can I just clarify then? So if we could carry the form, presumably there'll be an information sheet that says these are the ways you can apply, which we include online. So we could carry that as well. And so we could say, this is how you do it. If you haven't got access to online, here's your form that you've got to get to. Can we do both of those things?
I don't see why not. I suppose one thing we would do ahead of this, some leaflets to show, here's the ID you require. First off, have you got one of these? Because you probably have, and most people have.
Okay.
But if not, call us. We can organise a booking appointment for you to come in, send the form out to your home address, different ways of doing it. The first step is, you probably have got an ID, look at this long list, and then we can deal with any misapprehensions or anything like that before we get on the application process.
Councillor Humphreys.
I know that's tightening up on IDs and that. Is any tightening up taking place in postal votes? You won't need to identify, but let the normal process.
Yes, for now. So there are no changes for postal voting ahead of the May elections, so exactly as it is. After the May elections, though, there will be changes to the application process so that you'll be able to do it online, but then you will have to provide some evidence of your identity. At the moment, you don't need to provide your passport or anything like that to get a postal vote. And there are restrictions on the handling of applications and things like that by political parties. They are all, I think, July this year. So this set of elections, no changes.
Right.
And one of the routes actually that we could suggest people to go down if they haven't got the right ID for this election is actually you can still apply to vote by post. That doesn't require all of the sundry elements in terms of voter ID. So for now, if that's an option for you and it works for the elector, a postal vote application form might be the answer.
Thanks, Martin. Councillor.
Thank you. Just kind of around that again. But I know from looking at statistics that it seems to be unequally favoured towards older people that are more settled with bills that come in. And there seems to be a concern around young people accessing this kind of level of ID and having this ID. So I wonder if we've got a specific strategy for targeting younger people. And also, when the new systems come in with postal votes, will the postal votes that they currently have become invalid?
I shall have over to my technical expert.
Thank you. So firstly, on the strategy for groups that may be more affected than others, that is definitely part of what we're doing. So the first step is everyone needs ID. You need to make sure you bring it with you, don't forget it whatever you do. And then for those groups which might be particularly affected, and the Election Commission has done research on who these might be. So as you're saying, it's over 85-year-olds, it's some younger people, people who change gender, things like that. So areas where people might need extra help to get over the line to get an ID. We'll target those specifically. We're working on that at the moment. And the second question, sorry.
Was if they, because usually postal votes last for a number of years, will they all become invalid on that deadline?
No, as far as I understand it, it will be a rolling programme. So at the moment, every 5 years, you need to provide a new signature, don't you?
Yeah.
That will change to 3 years. And then we will write to postal voters post-election then to say, right, here's the people who need to provide evidence of their identity. It'll be a write-out. Now, I think that is staggered, but we haven't got full guidance on that yet.
Brilliant, thank you.
Councillor David.
Got another one. Proxy voters.
No, it's good. So proxy voters will be affected by the change in May 23. So if you are a proxy for somebody else, you will need to bring your ID to vote in person. You don't need to bring that other person's ID. So it's not the same as collecting a parcel where you need to bring their ID. You will need ID to vote in person. So again, that could be a way around it for some people who want to appoint a proxy because they haven't got ID. That's possible. There is also a change to emergency proxies. So, for example, if I was planning to use my passport and the day before the election, the dog eats it, that kind of scenario, there is an emergency proxy provision now for someone saying, look, I had ID up until yesterday. It's now not suitable for whatever reason, water damage or whatever. Can I have an emergency proxy, please? We haven't got the forms on that yet, but that might be a way out for some people who haven't got ID as well. But they need to have had ID in the first place. It's not a instead of.
I didn't realise that. I thought it was only homework that done that.
Exactly.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, excuse my complete ignorance here. So, in a scenario where somebody turns up in this coming May's elections and has no ID, will they be able to vote?
No.
So you've obviously been doing some forecasting, looking at 3X. Have you forecast a number or a percentage of the North Warwickshire voting population that will not prepare themselves because everything tells them that nobody's going to do this because actually there is a general apathy around voting anyway.
So we're basing some of our numbers on the Electoral Commission's research, which says that 6% of people don't have one of the required IDs at the moment. And we think that may be skewed slightly more to more urban population, general population, so it might not be that bad in North Warwickshire. But what we don't know is the people who, as you say, walking past might not have their ID with them, but then wouldn't return with the valid ID later. So the turnaround rate, if you like, for someone who is turned away who then doesn't return, we can't really predict that. We can obviously do what we can to make sure people are ready to vote. They bring their ID with them and publicise it as much as possible.
What one imagines the commonly held form of ID is a photo driving licence, but that will discriminate, won't it, against older people like me, who still haven't bothered getting a photo driving licence. So I'm down to.
You're still using a green one?
It was a choice.
Yeah, I'm not having any point showing them my licence from that photos. No, so it will discriminate.
Live on YouTube.
Most
It
older
would
people have
discriminate
passports.
a number of people who are
That,
You have
without
to get your
passports or
bus
without
pass.
driving licence, or who will tend to be older people within our community.
Yes, and the over 85s are a particular group that
Well, 95.
no, sorry.
just look at sometimes.
Most days,
I'll stop now. You're right, obviously, some people who haven't ever applied for a voter ID licence or their passport is expired. One thing for that is that expired IDs, as long as they still match the person who's presenting them, are acceptable. So expired passport might be appropriate.
Yeah. So when does the borough intend to start this campaign? Because clearly we're going to have a huge piece of work on those, aren't we?
Yeah. So the voter authority certificate service, where you can apply for one if you need one, goes live on the 16th of January, and we're looking to time it just before that, so that we don't then rush on. Everyone goes on the day that it goes live for obviously public
Which is what
reasons.
we're doing.
So we're looking around the 8th of January, and return after Christmas. And we're looking at a range of ways at the moment where it's hitting people where they already are. So obviously posters in polling stations is a bit of a no-brainer. We're looking at the funding available for things like leaflets and council tax bills. That will be dependent on the funding that we get from the government to do this though, because there is no local comms funding available. So we'll have to scale that as appropriate. We may get some funding, but we haven't factored out yet. And a range of other ways we can just kind of wallpaper this as much as possible.
And just one more thing. So people will still get a polling card, it's just to exercise. So we can be explicitly clear when the polling card is delivered that there is a requirement to reduce ID.
Yes, and the poll card will now be larger as well, to fit the long list of ID actually on it. So it won't be an A5 piece of card. It'll be more A4 folded. We think probably with some kind of like an old payslip arrangement around the edge to keep it folded, because it saves on envelope and things like that, which obviously adds to costs. So it'll be a large piece, but it will have the ID on it. So if they go with it in their hand, it should be a prompt to them. They need to take ID as well.
Sorry, just 4 quick points because this is important. Just to partly answer the question that Councillor Chambers raised around do we have any flexibility? The answer is no, as you got from that question. Part of my concern with this is that we can't be everywhere, and so the regulations have gone through them yet because they're about 6 inches, but the decision is the presiding officers. So you will need to bear with us that there will possibly be a little bit of variation. But I think I'm right in saying that our training will be purposeful. The idea is to get people to vote and therefore not go, well, I'm not sure about this. If it's broadly, it can't be ridiculous. It can't be a sort of cartoon picture or whatever. But the idea will be, where possible, allow people to vote. That's the only flexibility that we've got. In terms of the comp plans, it strikes me that we could share that with you on a more regular basis, so you're aware. But things like the council tax letter and things like that, and bins and side of bin lorries and that sort of stuff, we'll try and utilise. There is a deadline for the VAC, the voter, what it's called, pack, which is quite a bit earlier than I was anticipating. We were wondering about whether we'd be flying around on the day of these, but it's quite a bit before the election day. So again, there's no discretion on that. And I think the only other thing about emergency proxy is, as Martin says, if people ring up and say, I haven't managed to get myself organised, can I have an emergency proxy? That's unlikely to qualify as an emergency proxy, but I've lost my ID or I've been called into various things, will qualify as an emergency proxy. And obviously I can't suggest to people how they arrange emergency proxies, but that's some guidance in terms of just don't tell them, I didn't know anything about this, go down the routes that are available. But yeah, we'll try and do our own local comms, because the national comms will work to a certain extent. We obviously know that various communities will ignore the national comms because they're national, but we'll make them up because it's got work council. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. I think the key thing is, obviously, we've heard what we're doing as a council, but as I said before, this is national. So there's going to be you know, one would expect, and Mark's confirming, saw him nod his head. I mean, so there's going to be a national campaign and publicity on this as well. But we will, fall in behind that, or probably, or in conjunction with that. Big changes.
Can I ask, is your estimate though, or their estimate is 6%? So, okay. The great majority of people have got them.
Okay, so I will move that from the chair then, and seconded by Councillor Bell. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Item number 8 is the corporate plan performance update. This report informs members of progress to date against the aims set out in the 2022-23 corporate plan. Members are asked to note and identify any issues on which further information is required. Councillor Bell.
I'd just like to say, well done. I like the content and I like the format. It looks really good. So, well done, whoever did that.
Councillor Gosling.
Just on the format, terrible teacher habit, I'm afraid. But there's a couple of formatting errors and there's a few spaces. Will it be proofed again? So there's some places where it talks about eyes and some places where it talks about we's, and kind of consistency of grammar.
Happy to do that, but if you can point us in the direction, that will improve our proofreading.
I'll share it later.
Thank you very much.
I'll share it later. But regarding the content, I was drawn to some of the kind of, it's mostly on the reporting at the back, the 2016 to 2020 health index figures, which showed to have fallen about 8 points, which were quite concerning in one of the tax documents for North Warwickshire, and wondered whether the Health and Wellbeing Committee could go back and report on some of the reasons around that. That seemed quite a drastic drop between 2016 and 2020 for 8-point drop. And also on the HS2, which is grade, we raised an issue when we visited about jobs in North Warwickshire not getting their allocation of jobs and skilled jobs. I wondered if we had any further information on
that.
Just very briefly, I'm happy to ask the officers to bring a report to the Health and Wellbeing Board, see if we can get health colleagues or whatever to try and provide some information on that. I can provide a written update on HS2 jobs, or I can do it now, whichever is most convenient to the board. In short, the figures have increased. And I can set this out in a bit more detail in terms of what it's gone from and to. We are now part of job brokerage schemes. So the County Council is a formal job broker, which means they get involved in placements and that sort of stuff. We are now signed up to the job alerts, which we weren't previously. And so those will go out on a regular basis on social media. And we've also got another meeting following the Warwickshire-wide group that needs to meet again with HS2. Because we were a little reluctant when we had our meeting partners in February, March, but they will now attend and we'll close that. We're doing as much as we can, but I'll let you know what the outcome of that is. So that's okay. Thank you.
Councillor Chambers.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Councillor Bell said about the format and the detail that's in here. It reads very well as a corporate plan, and it has changed a lot since the first corporate plan I saw when I first came to the council. So yeah, I have my congratulations to those that prepared it. I think the proposal to look at some of these health indicators and to try and dive into some of the more detailed comparisons that have come through in the links that we have there is something that the health and wellbeing subgroup could usefully look at. I think one of the most concerning changes seems to be around children's emotional and mental health and the worsening suicide. So I think it would be worth trying to understand almost line by line where we are as a borough. And the only other comment I would make is that there isn't, as far, I may not have read it carefully enough, but there doesn't seem to be, given cost of living crisis that we're facing over the next, well, now and over the next 2 years, much reference to our financial inclusion work and the efforts that are being made to support people with the cost of living crisis. And it seems to me it's something that's going to run certainly in the next year or for the duration of this corporate plan. And I may have missed the reference to it, but it doesn't stand out to me as being something that given all the work that is going on and the commitment that we gave in September, I think it'd be useful to have at least a sentence somewhere in here that reflects it, perhaps under the chapter marked prosperous and healthy.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Simmons.
Yeah, just a quick thing in terms of the conversation you were saying about your partnership group with HS2. In terms of prosperity, do they feed back into us? Because I know they record, Balfour Beatty Vinci record for their own social responsibility information. How much of what is then reinvested in the community? So, for example, where they're using local businesses for the work. So, how much of, for argument's sake, is actually going back into the community into businesses? So we can understand what prosperity is coming back from HS2 into local businesses where they're using local providers. I know around Coleshill area there's a huge number of local providers being used, but it's whether or not we can understand what scale that is.
Let's bring Chief Executive.
Sorry, so just on those 2 points. So we don't get a formal report, but no, it would be a good idea. We've seen examples on the Warwickshire Group, for example, of work taking place in a Curzon school. The Chief Executive HS2 was painting something, but something a bit wider.
Not just the
On
CSR.
the social value stuff.
And where they go to Woodlands and we do the playgrounds and stuff like that. Not just that, actually, where they're buying their services. And where they're commissioning their the social value added.
Yeah, that's great. And just on the cost of living, it's EO4 around the cost of living. It's headed vulnerability work from COVID, so perhaps it needs to change the cost of living a bit more because you wouldn't find it from that. There's a commentary there about what's happening, and you've also got the cost of living report back on the agenda as well.
Thanks. Councillor Humphreys.
I'm going to say in reply to Councillor Gosling there to say, we listened the Flannery, which is in Warwickshire. They're training over 2,000 people to use that heavy equipment. I know it was over a 2 year period, and they're building up the numbers of people that they want. I've kept in touch with Ryan Flannery, and he says that you can only train the people with the right aptitude and that they want in the first place. And you can only train who comes through the door. Now, I will ask him how many people come through the door that are actually Warwickshire based, but as you can appreciate, it's such a big job. I mean, the basic rate of pay on driving a dumper is £26 an hour. I mean, it's a pretty, and people are earning £800,000 a week. And I don't know if you went on the thing, but the girl that we saw there, she worked for Lloyds Bank and she doubled her wages overnight by putting an orange suit on. That's how she was. So it's that sort of people that. So we are training people in Warwickshire. It's a question if the people in Warwickshire turn up for training.
Thank you, Councillor. 800 to 1,000, not 800,000. 800 to 1,000.
Yeah.
Pen down.
Give me his name. I've got Councillor Riley and then.
I just wanted to respond to that point, really, in that it was one of the concerns raised when we visited Kingsbury site. And one of the things that they said was a target for them was they were predominantly employing from the other side of the borders, not from North Warwickshire. So they raised it as an issue. And when we were asking about it, they said, no, actually, at the moment, predominantly, the employment specifically at Kingsbury was coming from Birmingham and South, not from North Warwickshire.
Thank you. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to recognise the good work that the Chief Executive has been doing on this very issue over quite a period now with HS2, with its main contractors in terms of creating opportunities for Warwickshire residents, but also creating opportunities for Warwickshire school leavers especially. So it has been a bit of a challenge, to say the least, but actually at the last leaders group meeting for HS2 across Warwickshire, the actions from HS2 were impressive. We just now needs to see numbers to deliver on the ambitions.
Okay, thank you. So I will move that from the chair then, seconded by councillor Humphreys. All those in favour? That is unanimous, thank you. Item number 9 is the Budgetary Control Report 2022-23, period ended 31st of October 22. Excuse me, the report sets out the financial position for services reporting to this board at the end of October and shows services are in line with the expected position. Any comments or questions? Councillor Gosling.
Thank you. Around the risks of the local plan, so we've got a high likelihood and high impact, and I'd like to understand more around where those risks come from, and more specifically where those risks come from, and the likelihood of an impact, if possible. On page 2.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go on.
Chair, if I may chip in, I think a little while ago now we did see the costs for the local plan start to increase quite dramatically because of the additional work we were doing around things like duty to cooperate, around some of the studies we're doing. So at that point we decided financially it was quite a risk, and because some of the costs involved could be significant, that's why we assessed it like that. Now, to be fair, from my perspective, I haven't seen a particular need to take that down because there seems to still be a lot of ongoing work around the local plan. But that's why it came in as a risk, just to say that it does cost the council quite a bit of cash, and there's no immediate sign of it disappearing.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the key to the answer really is the word process. It's the local planning process that is the issue, not the local plan. And inevitably, the latest comments from government have been that we need to review and reissue the local plan far more frequently than we did in the past. And the evidence base to achieve that is deeper. You may take a view, it's a lot of work for not a lot of gain. But actually, the reality is when we go through a planning application, we put a lot of people to proof of evidence of sustainability, of ecology assessment, what have you. This is only really, I think, in some ways, putting our plan on the same basis of what we do with planning applicants. So the process is becoming more expensive and will have to happen more frequently. Now, whether that's a risk to the budget or whether that's something that says you actually need to put more longer into the budget is a fair point, I think. But without doubt, it's going to happen more often. It's going to cost more money.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Any other comments or queries? Okay, so I shall move that from the chair again, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Item number 10 is the report of members' independent remuneration panel. When setting or reviewing members' allowances, regulations require the council to consider the recommendations of an independent remuneration panel. The previous review of allowances agreed indexation until the end of March 2022. So a further review was needed and has now been undertaken. Continued indexation of allowances until March 2026 is now recommended, which is the maximum time frame permitted under the regulations. It's recommended that all existing special responsibility allowances be continued at their current levels and that an additional allowance be paid to the Vice Chair of the Executive Board. It's also recommended that other allowances continue at their current levels, but some changes to the wording in the allowances schemes are made.
Just before we start about member interest, it occurred to me during the pecuniary and personal interests that clearly a lot of members, in fact, most members have an interest in this issue. But I think given how widespread that is and what the effect would be, that if everybody got an interest was knocked out, there'd be nobody, Council Cap would be able to vote, but nobody else would. So I think it's fine for us to continue. It's a recommendation up to Council, and so I'll get the monitoring officer to do a formal note on that. But I just wanted to cover that point off just before we started the discussion. So apologies, Chair.
Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't had a chance to check back, but the new rate or mileage allowance for a hybrid stroke electric vehicle at 45p per mile, is that the same as for the carbon emitting
Yeah.
vehicle?
It is.
No.
Yes, yeah. Councillor Simpson.
Well, thank you, Chairman. On page 27 of 114, I'm not sure the page on the report, it refers to someone that asked that members of the planning and development, the consideration given to members of the planning and development will be given an SRA. That was me. And I generally think it is time for us to genuinely consider the amount of additional time and effort the members of the planning and development board put into the process. That board reaches way more frequent than the average board. Its meetings, because they're so appallingly chaired, seem to take way longer than all the rest. And on top of that, there's a significant amount of additional work in terms of site visits and what have you. Now, I'm not necessarily challenging the decision at the minute, but the decision seems, the recommendation for us is, well, not many others do it, even though Bassett or Warwick do. I don't think whether others do it or don't do it is a determination. It's a comment on what their systems are. And, you know, I do think it's a bit risible that at the bottom it says, well, the only people on planning board are those who are interested. It's not really fair to say that, is it? The only people on the council are those that are interested. Although after 4th of May, there may be rather less of us, if 6% aren't going to vote anyway. I do think that this is something that actually it's fair, because we expect a lot of the members of the planning board. Now, there are a couple of things in here that it says which I think require further consideration. Particularly, it talks about training, and it says where training is arranged, it isn't mandatory but is encouraged. Actually, I think we're getting into a situation across the country where training for our planning board ought to be mandatory. A number of other authorities do it, and I know there was at least one council, which I'm sure the chief executive will remind me of, somewhere in Norfolk, I think, where one member of their planning board was suspended because that council had not shown enough understanding of the process. And if we're not actually forcing people to go through that training, that's a fair criticism, not of them, but of us as a generality. So whilst I'm tolerably happy to accept the recommendation not now, in my world that means not now, not ever. And I do think we need to do more in terms of training and make that training mandatory. And actually I think we should do rather more to make attendance at site visits more than simply encourage, because sometimes it's embarrassing out few people that are there. But I think, you know, overall, I think the report is fair. But I think sometimes we need to more accurately reflect the work that, if you will, backbench members are doing.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Yeah. I mean, I share your concerns and your comments. You know, this is the report of the Independent Remuneration Panel, and you know, I believe they spoke to quite a large proportion of the members who, you know, no doubt fed in their thoughts and comments, and this is what they have come up with. Interestingly, while I'm on the subject of changes to wording, one of the things, and I've spoken to the chief exec about this, it all does seem very confusing, but it's certainly confusing to me. And that's where we've got deputy leader and chair of resources, or deputy leader and chairman of whatever board. So I've asked the chief exec to bring a report to well, presumably full council, to remove the deputy leader, and we'll just have chairs of boards, and then the deputy leader that we have of council will be the deputy leader. So we won't have 4 deputy leaders and a deputy leader. See what I we will have one deputy leader who will be the deputy leader.
You're trying to make it confusing, aren't you?
But as it says in the report, who it is normal of this council that whoever's the deputy leader is the vice chair of executive board, as the leader is the chair of executive board. So that will remove that confusion. I know it doesn't take a lot to confuse me, but it certainly confused me when I first came onto this council. Well, who are all these deputy leaders, and what do they all do? So it is confusing. So that's one of the things we're doing. As for Councillor Simpson's about I mean, I guess, well, clearly the Independent Remuneration Panel have not agreed to give in effect, a modest or any sort of special responsibility allowance to the members of planning board. I suppose it's up to individual groups to encourage the members of the planning board to attend those site visits, remind them that they can claim travel. And as far as training, absolutely 100% agree with you, Councillor Simpson. Then that the training should be. I thought it was mandatory if you were to be a member of planning board or in fact licensing. I thought you had to have done the training. Councillor Simpson.
It shows how the world moves on, Chair. And we had this discussion was it 4 or 8 years ago? I guess the honest answer is COVID going the way, but we talked about making it mandatory. I don't think we did. But I think if the chief executive is going to start tinkering with the constitution in a very positive way to demote those who are deputy leaders into not deputy leaders, he could bring that change in at the same time.
Councillor Gosling.
Just on the point, I actually mentioned as well that the commitment for the planning board is higher than the commitment to other boards, and the regular meetings, the site visits and training. And obviously there are challenges to attending mandatory training and site visits. And I think we need to look at how we can remove some of those barriers, and possibly one of the ways could be by doing digital learning. And things like I do a huge amounts of digital learning where you just sit down, you've got an hour, you can fit it into your own timescale, you don't have to be a face-to-face meeting. Kind of use the technology that we've got to kind of overcome some of those barriers. Don't think it would work as well as site visits, unfortunately, but potentially we could video or we could share and other things.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think we have, on one occasion, had a drone site visit. And I think if we could look at doing rather more stuff by drone to remove the opportunity for everyone to have to turn up on a cold, wet Saturday morning, then I think that would be positive. But there's a significant resource application in getting that done.
Build that into the capital programme. We have to buy a drone there. Chief Exec.
Just my last point, I would expect that cost to be borne by the applicant rather than ourselves. I did get rather excited to see that there was a new AI function for drones, so that when you can get drone function, you get an AI thing, so you can get the goggles on you and you can walk around the site whilst potentially look after children or whatever it is that's stopping you going out on the site. So we'll keep an eye on that. In terms of training, I don't think we have resolved the council to make any elements mandatory. There needs to be sufficient training for those regulatory purposes, but I can bring the report back to set out what we're planning post-election anyway in terms of finance and planning, particularly plus 1 or 2 other bits and pieces, and we can put the pros and cons in that as to whether you want to make all of it or none of it or some of it mandatory. So I'm happy to revisit that next week.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, I was going to mention drones, so that's good. It is mandatory to be on for regulatory committee at county to training, and also for people who sub. So we need to make sure this is wide as possible across the county council for those that need to do the training. So we've got some people that can substitute.
I was under the impression and clearly I'm wrong, that it wasn't a local decision. I thought it was, nationally, if you were a member of planning board or, as I say, licensing, that you had to have done the training before you can sit on a board. I thought it was a
I think
national.
the legal position is that sufficient members need to have had sufficient training, which doesn't mean that everybody needs to have that, because you
Very
have a
right.
situation of,
Yeah.
if you have a new member that's elected and becomes a sub, you need 15 people to be on the planning board.
Yeah.
If you don't regulate that in terms of training. But yes, certainly the lawyers in the room would be more comfortable with being able to waive at the court of appeal a training document that says, yes, everybody who's involved in that decision has had all the training about everything.
Okay.
So we can move towards that position, so.
Thanks, Steve. Councillor Simpson.
I should say, I'm generally against mandatory anything. People don't like being told what to do. As you can imagine. But I do think this is a bit of authority, and for the individual members who are engaged. There are across the country issues where people are challenging the training base, and genuinely, and this isn't a party political thing. Every government that comes in wants to tinker about with planning and change it. If they stop messing about with it, we might remember it a bit more. But because it changes so much, I think it is important that we have that level of training. Now, training is expensive; it's not cheap, and to do it and only have half the membership turn up is a bit frustrating.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Okay, so I'll move the recommendation from the chair, seconded by Councillor Bell. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you. So item number 11 is the debate. Sorry.
Is our chief executive going to tell us what the plan is on the rest of it? In terms of training and stuff, but there'll be a report back at some point in the future.
Yes, at your next meeting, I'll bring a report on the training that we're proposing post-election. And you can then, I would suggest that you wait until that point before deciding as to whether or not it's mandatory rather than sure it's not. Certainly, the celebration.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. 11, is the Debate Not Hate LGA campaign. The Local Government Association is running a campaign to raise public awareness of the role councillors play in the democratic process and in their communities, and to support members in the face of increasing incidents of abusive behaviour. The Debate Not Hate report sets out a number of recommendations which are included in the report. It's recommended that the council signs up to the campaign in addition to any councillors who wish to do so personally. The LGA is also offering 14 training sessions in the new year, and the council has been able to secure one of those sessions. The dates will be confirmed, and it's suggested that the main focus of this training will be on managing aggression. Any comments, queries? Okay, move from the chair then, seconded by, oh, sorry, you seconding, or do you have a question, Councillor Simpson?
Yeah, use a comment, really. I support it. It's important. I just really question, is it actually going to achieve anything? Is it another paper exercise? When you start talking about digital citizenship, it always makes me cringe. I think there's a lot of buzzwords in here, and that's unfortunate because this is a real issue, and I think people are being intimidated. I think people are being put off from standing for election because of what's happening. I just wish there was a bit more teeth in this. If you look at recommendation 7, it shows the effort that's gone into it because they don't even know which government department should be doing it.
I agree. Yeah, it's we've all seen, not just MPs but also councillors being, attacked. It's something to try and tackle that. I think it'll change a great deal, but we can but try, as they say. Okay.
I'll second it now.
Thank you. All those in favour? And again, that is unanimous. Thank you. Item number 12 is the West Midlands Land Charter. West Midlands Combined Authority has adopted a public land charter to aid it and councils working in unlocking the development potential of surplus publicly owned land. The council's been invited to become a signatory to this charter, and whilst we don't own very much surplus land, it is recommended that we sign up, as encouraging particularly the metropolitan areas to increase the efficient use of land in their areas will help increase housing and employment provision and reduce the pressure for this to be accommodated elsewhere. Any comments or questions? Councillor Simpson and then Councillor Riley.
I'd almost refer you to my earlier comments, Chairman. I mean, in theory, this sounds like a good thing to do, but as you say, we haven't got a lot of land. I don't think there's a lot of spare land floating around in the West Midlands. If there is, then fine. I just don't know. I honestly don't know if this is any more than just another bunch of words.
Okay.
I don't think it does any harm, but I just question, what is it actually going to achieve?
Thank you. Councillor Riley.
Really, it was a question follows on from Councillor Simpson, and that was how much land are we talking about in the borough? I mean, it strikes me that the borough ownership predominantly extends to playing sports pitches and playgrounds. Those would be the very thing that we should be seeking to protect going forward, as opposed to releasing any sort of protection that they have.
I don't know off the top of my head.
No, I think the key issue here is surplus land. That's why we're keen for that definition, because we do own bits of land, but not very much of it's surplus. You know, as you say, bits have got, you know, these offices and leisure centres and things like that, which we're quite keen to hang on to for the time being. So yeah, it's about surplus land. So no, all of these initiatives, particularly brownfield release and all this sort of thing, don't apply hugely to us. But equally, it's worth encouraging this shoulder to the wheel, and you never know when you might end up running a for Hatting Mill or wherever as part of our levelling up work and project work and all that sort of stuff. And if the Luff bid comes in, then that position may change, and therefore we may require some of the levers and some of the funding and some of the expertise that the West Midlands Command Authority have. So yeah, there's not much for us, but it's a bit of strategic opportunism for us to be ready in case we do.
Yeah,
Thank you for that. So I mean, in simple terms, we're not risking a repeat of the school playing field scenario where we now have a number of schools who have sold off their playing fields and fine with that themselves with that provision.
Yeah, this would not cut across any planning policies or indeed our intentions in terms of what that land is used for.
This is the key thing to this is that if we sign up to it, it's the bigger councils, the Mets and the city councils that have the surplus land, or they own much more land. So if we all sign up to it, it will hopefully focus their mind on using their surplus land rather than taking what could consider to be an easy option. Well, we haven't got any land, so we'll just push our needs onto North Warwickshire that's got a lot of land, full stop, let alone publicly owned. I think that it's trying to
I mean, I agree with that, Chair. It's interesting though, isn't it? So, I mean, it's good as long as other local authorities don't own any land in North Warwickshire. So I've taken the back during our local planning process that actually where the land ownership listed and to find that there was a very small number of very large landowners in the borough who were existing at the time. So as long as we're advised there's no risk to the borough in doing this, but it is one of opportunity, that's fine.
Councillor Simpson.
Chairman, just to remind everyone, there is one other land authority that owns quite a bit of land in North Warwickshire.
Mr. Lord.
No, the county council. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Councillor Humphreys.
Chair, I think it's playing with words because, if it suits them strategically, they're going to snatch whether it's public land, private land, and HS2, birch copies, if it suits them strategically, they'll just do it, and we'll have to sort of go along with it. I think signing up for it says we're actually agreeing to sort of be subservient to the main authorities.
Oh, well, I don't agree because this is about land that we own specifically, nothing to do with private land, nothing to do with, and this is to focus their mind to say you use your land first before you start then on encroaching on neighbouring authorities. So it's the opposite as to what you've just described, Councillor Humphries. So I'm going to propose it from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Simmons, thank you. All those in favour? And that is any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. Item number 13 is the draft local transport plan LTP4 consultation. The Warwickshire County Council are consulted in the latest version of their local transport plan. The report sets out the main features of the plan proposed by the county and also provides some observations from North Warwickshire perspective. Members are asked to identify any of the points they wish to feed back to the county council. Councillor Gosling.
On page 60, talking about freight, it discusses the improvements to lorry networks, lorry resting places networks. And it says that we support it providing the green infrastructure is in place, but surely we need other infrastructure, not just the green infrastructure. It needs to be in a strategic place and making sure that that works for us as well as for the lorry parks, which is one of the issues that we always face with the kind of golden triangle theory. And also kind of looking at safer roads and improving safety on our roads in ST, all of the ST actually. And one of the frustrations that we've certainly had in Anstey Common is that all of the data for judging our roads is based on the same set of statistics, which are national statistics. And obviously that's not appropriate for a rural setting. So in Anstey Common, it was criticised that only 200 people crossed the road at that point, therefore it didn't justify a crossing. Whereas obviously if we're in a rural setting, we're not going to expect the same footfalls that you would do in the middle of Stratford or somewhere like that. And in order to kind of make sure we've got that evidence-led road safety, we need a kind of different set of criteria to assess the rural areas.
No, thank you, Councillor Crossley. I totally agree. I mean, my feedback to the County Council would be to the authors of this report and the consultees is get out of your office and come to North Warwickshire to see where you are putting lines on roads, for instance, for safe cycle routes. You know, the side of the A5 is not a safe cycle route. You know, it is ridiculous. So quite clearly to me, you know, the people, as I say, on this, the authors of this report are sitting in their office just drawing lines on a map. They have no clue whatsoever as to what, you know, what these roads are like. So the feedback, you know, from me or from this council, I believe, should be, as I say, get out of your office and actually come and have a look at these roads and those roads that you've described. You know, we have many problems in just because we are a rural borough does not mean to say we have, you know, as we all know, we have many dangerous roads, rural roads in this borough, and the county just do not seem to recognise that at all. Councillor, are you indicating, Councillor Riley, or you're?
I am, Chair.
Oh,
Yes,
yes,
I have
thank
my
you.
hand raised.
I've got Councillor Riley, Councillor Simpson, then Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of three comments. This, as you said, this has taken so long to deliver. I can remember in ancient history going with Councillor Chambers to Warwickshire County Council to have dedicated meetings with Warwickshire officers about the North Warwickshire local transport plan, together with the Chief Exec, and nothing ever came of that. 4 years ago, I was involved in a consultation across all Warwickshire partners, which was repeated 4 months ago. The very same consultation. It's ridiculous. I am grateful to Mike Dickman for all the work that he's put into reviewing this and taking on board all the comments that have been made by that. So, if you don't mind, Chair, I'll just ask for a clarification about HGV weight limits. Because one of the things that we know across North Warwickshire, but also in a wider Warwickshire context, there is now a problem that the police do not enforce matters where HGV weight limits are broken. And notable locations in North Warwickshire would be Coleshill High Street, where our historic bridge and our high street are at risk of damage. But also, if you look from a Warwickshire context, they're not enforced in Warwick Town Centre, which is incredible looking at the heritage that sits in that town centre. So I don't know whether Mr. Dittman can advise whether there is anything we can put into this plan about a proposal to make somebody somewhere enforce a weight limit for a HGV, because it is free for all at the moment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not aware of any specific hours we can or requirements we can put onto the LTP4, but we can ask, and we can ask for a clarification on that very issue. And because again, it's not something I was aware of in terms of the enforcement. And it's also perhaps a direct suggestion we could include for better traffic management and better enforcement to apply those requirements. That would seem to me a quite sensible thing to do.
Which, I mean, obviously I support the report, but if we could have a conversation that supported that as well, and perhaps educated ourselves as to where the HGV weight limit exclusions were in the borough, that would be really helpful.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Chairman. Last time this came before, I had a deal of criticisms of it. No, I'm genuinely, having read the report, I'm encouraged that some of that has happened. We've had the meeting and we put forward our views on it. I think it has changed a bit. My overall concern, though, is it is still, if you like, I think it's a bit of a misnomer to call it a transport plan, because it's more policies aimed at how to encourage things to get better rather than firm proposals for how things will get better. The one, I think, big bright light, though it's fairly dim, is section 619, where Mr. Dittman talks about the county aiming to publish and monitor an annual action plan. I actually think that if they are going to have any action, that is the far more important element of this document. Now, the words in it don't give me a great deal of comfort, because it's where funding is anticipated. If it's secured, then well, fair enough. But I think it's more important for us to have input into that annual action plan than it is input into this motherhood and apple pie statement, which is, I think, really what it is. So, if you like, my request is that this board or the LDF or planning or all of them actually has significant input into the action plan. I have to say, annually, it sounds a bit hopeful, because you know the way things move, you won't the ink won't be dry on one before you're doing the next one, and you won't have had any money for the first one, and you spend all the money trying to upgrade the reports. But I do think, for me, the action plan is the meat on these bones, and that in itself is welcome, because it will show us where the county are thinking of going and give us the opportunity to highlight the greater needs we have in North Warwickshire.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Simmons.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So obviously this transport strategy, or transport plan, as I like to call it, obviously we're quite aware of some of the safety concerns and dangerous junctions that we have in our borough. There's no real mention of that. I know that there's a works that have been consulted on first for the Green Man Crossroads in Coleshill, and the second round of that's commencing, because they've come up with a slightly different plan, which has amended that to increase the safety of that junction. But again, there's no sort of innovation in there. So we talked about, Councillor Riley talked about the weight limit on the bridge. Things like a weight limit on there, or something that recorded the weight so you could find by camera, that would bring money in. It would also preserve the bridge, which would then help support the heritage of that bridge. There's lots of things that could be involved in this plan that seem to be missing, as far as I can see. And there was talk about 20-mile-an-hour zones in residential areas around schools, and they were piloting those. But again, some of those, they don't seem to be as part of this document at all. So there's loads that isn't actually there that was supposed to be the strategic aims of our transport strategy, improving safety, some of the most significant areas in our borough, you know, Furness End Crossroads, Longley and Coleshill. You know, we've got very little in the way of options for those. Obviously, there's the consultation at the moment on the second round of the Green Man Crossroads, which is where they've put back in the left turns, which they'd taken out in the original plan. There was no left or right turning, but now they've put left back in. But again, there's lots missing, I think, in terms of transport plan for our borough. And I think the county could do an awful lot more.
No, totally. I mean, again, I totally agree with Councillor Simmons. Yeah, words are cheap. Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I mean, it's there, isn't it? The you know, the safest travel strategy. We're going to engineer these things out, and yet, as Councillor Simmons has just said, you know, how many years have they been talking? County Highway's been talking about the Green Man Crossroads. How many years have they been talking about engineering the problem out at Longley Crossroads? You know, and their actions there, you know, at least one a week. Still, you know, words cheap. When it actually comes to delivering, county highways are particularly slow and particularly useless. And as we all know in this chamber, you know, we have some of the, is it the top 8 most dangerous junctions in the county, in our borough, and they just pontificate, is that, or they full of hot air. Councillor Riley and then Councillor Bell. You were itching to come in and respond.
I am, yeah. I've had a moment, one of those light bulb moments, and again, I share with some officer advice as to whether it's appropriate. But clearly at North Warwickshire, for a number of years now, we've been frustrated by the delay in the county council doing its 278. Was it 278?
Yeah.
Highways assessments, to the extent that we met with senior officers from Warwickshire County Council in this very chamber not 2 weeks ago to discuss the problem. Now, would it be appropriate to have a policy requirement in this strategy to say that as the Highways Authority and Highways Planning Authority, the County Council would set some performance measures for itself, perhaps to deliver all Highway 278 consultations within 8 weeks, as is the way with planning. Now, I can imagine that the County Council will be highly reticent to do that, but actually it strikes me that if we are intent on making improvements to make the roads safer and traffic flow better, then one of the things that the County Council can do very easily is speed up the planning process. I don't know if I feel that's an appropriate inclusion.
Yeah, I'm a little bit torn because we are moving outside of strategic planning into direct development control, which is where Section 78 comes to apply. It may not be appropriate. Nothing we can, no reason why we can't suggest that, which I think is a great idea. Whether they're actually under any regulatory requirement, and they may just throw back to us that's a part of a development control process. There's not much we can do. But it is an issue because we're delayed by it all the time, and that goes for plan side as well as development control side.
Thank you, Chair. Well, that's good to hear, Chair. I mean, I almost fell off my chair on pre-planning on Friday when we were addressed by a major developer who told us that Warwickshire County Council are the only council who determine that they will do applications themselves. In all other areas where this national developer is working, they do it and submit it to Warwickshire County Council. Therefore, there is no delay in terms of time. And when asked why Warwickshire County Council would want to be the only planning authority, highways planning authority that does this, the only suggestion that could be made was that it's to a degree revenue generating for the county council. Well, if that is the case, and there is no lawful requirement for the county council to do it, then we really must be championing every opportunity to speed this process up.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Bell.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to go back to two things that have been said and then add one more. So I absolutely agree on the weight limits, and we need absolute clarity here. We need to know, at the moment, only the police can enforce, and the police do not know the law on weight limit application. And bless him, when Barry Lees was here, he did so much work. He actually got the document from the House of Commons library and presented it to the inspector so that she could understand what the law was. So if it's the police, then they need training. This needs to be specific. If there is an alternative to the police, we need to know what it is. If Warwickshire County Council can get powers, I don't know whether they can, but if they can, do. Because at the moment, we might as well not have weight limits, because it doesn't mean anything anywhere. As I know, as the lorries charge over the canal bridge and straight through Harsel. So yeah, strengthen that, I think. And on the road safety issue, which Councillor Simmons mentioned, we need to be really specific. We've been top of the list for the country, never mind for Warwickshire, on dangerous roads for as long as I've been a councillor. So never mind this generic statement about making roads safer. Let's look where the inequalities are. North Warwickshire has many more accidents than anywhere else in the county. Therefore, resource needs to be poured into there to make sure that we at least come down to the national average, if nothing else. So we really need to strengthen that and be really specific about what we want. And the one that I'd add is, and I can't find it in the report, I might have missed it, the county, are piloting average speed checks at the moment. What is their policy going to be? This is what people are screaming for, because they actually work. Average speed checks along a stretch of road is the most effective way of controlling speed. And they are piloting it. What's the result of that pilot? What's happening? And where in North Warwickshire is this going to be applied? Yeah, just one in North Warwickshire somewhere.
Yeah, again, totally agree with Councillor Bell, absolutely 100%. Interestingly, there is an average speed check on the A426 from the A5 to the M6 in Rugby. So that is an average speed check. Interesting, that's clearly done by the County Council.
Yes.
I do not know why, because the chances of breaking the speed limit at a particular stretch of the road were pretty remote. Councillor Riley, you wanted to come back?
Well, I mean, it's about road safety, isn't it? Now, or Councillor Bell's comments about making it more North Warwickshire specific. We have the distinction in North Warwickshire of having over 30% of all extractions from serious car accidents across the country. So, considering the size of the county and the population of the county, we have 30% of accidents where people have to be cut out of the vehicles. And it's a common misnomer that these are all motorway accidents. They're not. We know that motorway accidents are actually small in number compared to arterial route and junction accidents when you look at the statistics. So whether we can perhaps put a number to our feedback, and the 30% number is harrowing, isn't it, when you think about it?
No, thank you, Councillor Riley. Okay. Excuse me. Right. Yes.
Chair, to a suggestion from the Chief Executive as well. We could ask or seek further detail on basically the dangerous and the action statistics in the borough. I did provide some earlier, which we got directly from Midlands Connect. So it's there is obviously information currently out there, and it would be interesting to see how more North Warwickshire specific we can get it, which may help direct some of the comments that we want to make back to the county.
Thank you. Okay, so we, I think you've got quite a lot of feedback from us, Mike, to go back to the county. So I will move the recommendation from the chair, seconded by Councillor Riley. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Item number 14 is the climate change action plan update. So following the responses received from the public and stakeholders to the consultation on the council's draft climate change action plan, the plan has been further developed to incorporate the comments received.
The all-party member group has been consulted on the revised plan, and members are now asked to approve the plan as drafted, ready for publication. Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Chairman. I was a little bit surprised to read the report, but then I guess I wasn't when I read the recommendation, which says that the chairs and opposition spokespersons of the Executive and Community Environment Boards have been consulted. That does beg the question in respect of Focus Area 5, why wasn't Councillor Phillips and myself consulted? And what do these recommendations in Focus Area 5 actually mean? I think this is a lost opportunity to engage rather more with the councils who are engaged in forward planning and development management. And I think it's extremely unfortunate that this is here for adoption without having taken the opportunity to talk to the Planning and Development Board. Given that, I will not be voting for or against this recommendation.
Councillor Chambers.
Now, I'm interested to hear what Councillor Simpson has said, because one of the first discussions of the climate change action group, the working group, was exactly that, planning and development. And we had several presentations on that, and we had the discussion about the relationship between our forward planning, the design criteria. There was quite a lot of design standards that, as I understand it, are being worked on, and how that then is translated into building regulations and some of the issues around that. So, I mean, I think it's very unfortunate if the chairs of the Planning and Development Board didn't actually see the versions that were coming through, then perhaps that needs to be reflected back to the officers. But certainly the planning and development side was, we felt, I think the Climate Change Action Group, that was one of the most important areas for this borough to address in terms of the whole way in which our responsibility in that area can address and support this need. So I just want to reassure you that I think it's 2 meetings at least we spent on it, with a lot of papers coming and presentations on that.
Yeah, I was under the impression, well, first of all, not under the impression, where it says focus area 1, 2, 3 to 7, they're the comments, if you like, or the questions that have come back from the public consultation. And I was under the impression that all boards have been looking at this.
No, it's been to see me and it's been to hear. It hasn't, it hasn't done the full.
Got it, sort of. Okay.
Yeah, I might say, I think the officers have been involved, because I think each department, if you like, looked at this for their own to see what they could contribute. So I think the officers in the planning department have seen it. It's, as you say, unfortunately it's not gone to the board, but certainly been very involved.
Joe, if I may suggest, and I'm sure Richard would say this if he was here, he had slightly less fun with the dentist today than he was anticipating, which is why he's not here. They just missed that bit, but I'm sure he'll say that this is a living, breathing document, and therefore the scope was to correct that by bringing this to the planning board or both as part of that continuing iteration of it. So we'll correct that omission.
I'm sure I'm speaking for Councillor Phillips as well, but he can have his evidence. But it's always nice to be consulted after the event once it's been adopted. And I will take that in the line with being demoted as the deputy leader of the council.
You're the first consultee on the next iteration.
Oh, thank you very much.
About as good as I can sell it, I'm afraid.
When you're consulting me, then could you tell me where all these brownfield land sites are that we're going to be making greater use of?
I can do that as part of that
Thank you
conversation.
very much. I look forward to this.
You can't do it now, but I can actually make sure it's done when you have that consultation.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Councillor Riley.
Oh, just an observation, Chair. I think that the plan is a great plan, isn't it? And my observations about the front page, I mean, we are committed in that plan to enhancing biodiversity. The front page is the River Cole, which is recognised as being in serious need of restoration and ecologically dead. And the picture itself is Colwyn Park, which is owned by the borough. And interestingly, the attractive plant that sits all over the riverbanks is in fact an invasive species, which on its own is doing much to kill the biodiversity the riverside areas along the whole of the Thane and the Coastal. So perhaps we might change what looks like an attractive picture into something that's
A perfect example of why we need to address these issues. It's a genius person, I may say.
Councillor Hayfield.
How are we going to know if this works?
Pardon?
How are we going to know if this works? If we adopt this now, yeah, we got a plan. How are we going to know it's worked? Had any impact?
Well, absolutely, and it's got to be monitored. You know, we've got to make one having a plan and then just putting it on a shelf. You know, we need to implement the plan and then monitor it, you know.
So will we get a report back in 12 months as to any progress in that?
Absolutely.
At least, yeah. I think there is a section in the plan about monitoring and back. I'm just trying to, yes, in fact,
Yeah, it is.
after page 28. I just go back to page 1, but it's internal page 102. And so the board meets probably 2 months to review and salary. So yeah, we'll set it out there. We'll make sure that we report everywhere that steps would like to be reported to, as well as consulted on. Since you'd rearrange that into a more English.
Councillor Gosling.
I think looking at the consultation, there's a number of very positive ideas in there which could help with that as well, such as setting a carbon budget and actually having a timeline, not just for consultation stages in the future, but for actual implementation or for an expectation of what we're actually going to achieve. I think preliminary the plan is great, but there aren't enough kind of short-term goals in it. And also, along with Councillor Chambers, would like to say that we very much, when we've been involved in this group in the preliminary stages, discussed how we could use our climate change policy in order to strengthen our planning policies and make sure that there were positive repercussions throughout the borough and in everything that we did to future-proof moving forward. So it was definitely a very big focus of the discussion, and I think it's really unfortunate that hasn't turned into a realistic expectation yet. But yeah, I think looking at some of the suggestions that we've been given, I think there's a number here, so more smart targets, meaningful KPIs that would actually, you know, setting out a clear path for future developments of this action plan. I think these have been recognised by other people as well in the consultation. Very useful to bring in. And I think one of the other things that we talked about that I haven't seen echoed as strongly as we would have liked is kind of commitments from our partners and actually making sure that in the same way with the transport plan, that we have those commitments to say what support we will get and what our expectations of our partners is going to be. So that we can actually use those for kind of quantitative steps to make sure that we can actually implement things effectively.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So I'll move the recommendation from the chair, seconded by Councillor Bell. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Item number 15 is the cost of living pressures.
I think the record, Jim, it was quite unanimous.
I do apologise. Nearly unanimous, one abstention. Sorry, Councillor.
I was going to support you, but I thought we'd been
I apologise. Item 15 is the cost of living pressures. Members will recall that on the 29th of December, the council held an engagement forum for the council and partners to consider what help is available to support residents and businesses during the current period of cost of living pressures. The report advises members of the key outcomes from the event and suggests 2 member champions are appointed to provide councillor oversight as this work continues. I am appointing, or my appointed member will be Councillor Riley. But it was a very good event. Councillor Gosling.
Just could we let you know tomorrow?
You can indeed. Thank
discussion.
you. Yeah.
Thank you.
It was a good event, very well attended, And we got, as the report says, that we got some very good outcomes from that event. I'll move the recommendation from the chair then. All those in favour? Councillor Simpson, are you?
No, I'm voting councillor Wiley, Chair.
And that is unanimous this time. Thank you.
Do I do an executive speech now?
Please don't. Thank you. Item 16 is the minutes of the Safer Communities Subcommittee held on the 27th of June of this year and also the 14th of November, which was circulated. Councillor Humphries, did you want to?
I'm just going to move them if everybody's okay with that.
Fantastic. Seconded. And I'll put that to the vote then. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? And that is again unanimous. Thank you. Item number 17 is the exclusion of the public and press.
Second recommendation.
Pardon?
Moved and seconded.
I'm not even wrote that. Okay. So that has been moved and seconded. All those in favour?